Okay guys, welcome to another video. In today's video I want to talk about generators. This isn't going to be a review on a specific generator. I want to talk about, do you need a generator in your preparedness plans? If so, what type to buy, what size to buy, and some downfalls or some drawbacks to generators. So for years and years, I always read in the prepping books and online and forums and stuff like that, like the quintessential like first prepping item everyone should buy is like a generator, because people rely so much on electricity, and once the power goes out, which in any disaster electricity tends to be the first utility to expire, so having a generator, you can start it up and you can have electricity for your house till the power comes back on. And I always read that, and I was always like, I think there's alternatives. I mean, people have survived hundreds of thousands of years without electricity, but now you need electricity to stay alive? It doesn't make sense to me. So I spent years and years without a generator, and I survived. Granted, I didn't go through many disasters, only like 4 or 5, but I never thought that I needed one. And then got a bonus at work, and it was National Preparedness Month, I think is what it's called. It was September, and a store near me was having this sale on generators. And I started searching and I started comparing them and figuring out what size generator, and long story short, I bought one. I bought this one. When it comes to generators, it's a pretty, people think it's some complex mechanism. It's pretty easy to explain. We pretty much have an engine that's spinning very fast, that's spinning a trying to put this in layman terms, but it's spinning a motor, and that motor is pretty much creating an electrical field, and out comes electricity. Like, it's not super complicated. To some it might be, to others it's like it makes sense. So when it comes to generators, there's like 10,591 different generators out there on the market. And if you think I just made that number up, that's because I did. But long story short, there's a lot of generators to pick from. The biggest downfall of generators is their noise signature. The classic one with the tubular frames. And you start up and it's a lawnmower. They run at 90, 100, 110 decibels. They're loud, they're annoying, and they're just not that pleasant to be around. So what I would recommend, and again, this is just my recommendations based on like kind of extensive research and comparison tests and everything, what I would recommend is, number one, search for a quiet generator. Now you might be asking yourself, how do I know if it's going to be quiet before I buy it? Now, 20 years ago, that would be a logical question. In 2018, there's this thing called YouTube, and there are so many generator geeks out there that any generator you're looking at, you can type it into YouTube, and the first thing to pop up will be sound comparison, because many people use RV generators for RV camping, and many RV parks have stipulations and rules against how loud a generator can be, forcing the generator market to market quiet generators. Now the RVing market and the boondocking market pretty much force the generator market to come up with quiet generators, but everyone now gets to reap those benefits, including preppers like you and me. So the first thing I would look for is a quiet generator. This one behind me isn't the quietest, and I'll do a sound comparison. The weather's very inclement right now, but I do need to take it out and run it for a couple hours because it's been sitting for a month or so. But rule number one, look for the quietest generator as possible, because just doing that will negate kind of the main disadvantage to generators. Number two is sizing, and sizing is important. Now, sizing, so generators are generally marketed in watts, right? So this one, because of the camera, it's reversed, but it's a 3,500 watt inverter generator. But it's not 3,500 watts. It's 3,500 surge watts, meaning when electric motors start up, air conditioners, vacuums, circular saws, high draw energy appliances, right when it first starts up to get that motor cranking, it's going to have a surge watt for like split second, and then it's going to taper down to its running watts. So this 3,500 generator can handle up to 3,500 watts of surge, but its running output is 3,000. Now, that's at 100% load. What I would say, just based on experience running multitude of machinery, gas engines, and trucks and lots of machinery, you never want to continually max out anything. That's like the maximum, right? So I was going through my house. I was using a meter to test the wattage of different appliances which I would want to use while using a generator, or appliances that I'd want to be able to operate if the grid went down. Namely, a fridge, a washing machine, because I like clean clothes. The furnace, I have a forced air furnace, so many people are concerned about RVers and stuff. They always test being able to run an air conditioner. I was more concerned about it being able to run a furnace, because I live in a cold climate, and I have a forced air furnace which has a blower fan which requires a lot of electricity. I wanted to run a microwave because microwaves can cook food very quickly, boil water quickly. And that's about it. I mean, lights and stuff like that, some people worry about. I have alternative light sources. And so those were kind of the big items that I wanted to power. And I started running the numbers, and I was like, I don't have to run them all at the same time. And I forget the number I came up with, but it was about half to a quarter. It was, let's say half. It was, let's say 1,500 watts. And many people may be saying, if you only needed 1,500 watts, why did you buy a generator capable of 3,000 running watts or 3,500 surge watts? It's an interesting question. And I question that sometimes too. And after I bought this generator, I was like, maybe I should have gotten a smaller, more portable generator. But the reason I did that is, like I was just talking about, I never like maxing out equipment. So with all the appliances that I would like to power in a grid down event, it would only force this generator to run at 50% operating load. If I vary it, so if I don't run them all back to back, if I run one, get done with it, and then run another, this generator will be running at about 25% of its rated load. Now, some people might be saying, that's vastly inefficient because you're going to be burning so much extra fuel. And while that's true, this generator and many like it out there, they're called inverter generators. What inverter generators do is produce DC power, and DC power, pretty much the faster the engine speeds, the more electricity. I'm confusing so many people here, but long story short, it produces DC power, and then it automatically converts it to AC via an inverter, which means if you're only pulling 1500 watts out, it's going to pretty much be idling. And I've ran tests, and running high draw equipment, this thing will vary its engine speed. So if you're not running that much, it's going to be running very slow, which will mean quieter and less fuel consumption. If you max this out, it'll be running at max engine speed around 3600 RPM, and it's going to be at its loudest. So that goes back to why I kind of bought an oversized generator. Generally, that's not recommended because of the fuel inefficiency, but with this, I can run the maximum amount of wattage that I need, and it's going to pretty much continue to idle. So in a way, this is going to be more fuel efficient than those micro portable generators like a 2000 watt generator, because with the same given load, that 2000 watt generator might be running at like 80% load, so it's going to be running at a higher speed, granted a smaller motor, but a higher speed to produce the same amount of electricity, so it might actually consume more fuel. The other reason I chose this is fuel tank capacity. This has a 2.5 gallon fuel tank capacity. Those small portables generally have about a 1 gallon. So running at 50% load, which would be let's say 1500 watts, the fuel tank, 2.5 gallons, will run continuously for 12 hours. That's a long time. So that means one 5-gallon fuel can will power my house constantly for 24 hours. The thing is, it's best to find ways that you don't need to run your generator constantly, which means maybe you turn it on for an hour or two, and that will power your fridge. It will allow your furnace to kick on and heat your house up. 1 hour might be long enough for you to do one load of laundry, and then you go outside and you flip it off. And then maybe later that day you start it up for an hour or two, and then you shut it off. Doing it like that, if my calculations are right, which I'm decent at mathematics, a 5-gallon fuel tank is going to last me like a week or more. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the fuel consumption of this generator and generators like this are so low. So I want to say this now because it's kind of important. Inverter generators are going to be more expensive than a standard generator, but their high fuel efficiency, depending on how much you need to use it, could offset that. So you could buy a cheaper generator, non-inverter generator, so you can get more output for less money, but you might have to store 20 gallons of fuel because it just burns through fuel so quickly. This fuel tank, I would probably be able to ration myself to about 5 gallons of fuel for a week, depending on the circumstances, maybe way less. Maybe I find out I barely need to run this. And again, this isn't a review of this generator. I just wanted to talk about why I bought this one and this style. So you can get bigger ones than this, and you can get smaller ones. You can get the 2000 watt ones. And I kind of talked about why I chose this size for me. If you live in an apartment and you have an outside balcony and you need to be able to carry that generator up to that balcony, and you don't have many appliances, you might be better off with one of those smaller ones. What I found is this size actually are quieter than small 2000 watt generators, because in a way it's an oversized engine, but you're going to be running it at like 25% load capacity. Plus, in general, these actually tend to be quieter. So this thing is insanely quiet, which negates kind of the main detriment of generators. Now, this is the point where I want to talk about, because there's a lot of people out there, kind of green energy or kind of the primitive bushcrafty type people. They're like, you know, man has survived without electricity for years. I forget like when electricity was first invented, but let's say the late 1800s. I think I forget DC and then AC, but it wasn't even prevalent in houses up until maybe the 20s. You know, and again, I'm not like a historian. Um, and people survive just fine. So this is where people are going to say, but I don't need electricity. Well, if that's the case, don't buy a generator. If you're fine with not having electricity, just don't buy a generator. But like I kind of explained, the fuel use of this is so low, the utility it provides is so high. Um, if I don't want to run it, I don't have to. At the end of the day, it just gives me an option, right? I do want to talk about, though, alternatives and some things to keep in mind, because many people will say, use an alternative heat source. You know, because I talked about running a furnace, and people will say, use an alternative heat source. Well, those alternative heat sources, what do they consume? Well, they consume fuel. Um, like, for example, my backup heat source is a wood stove. So I have a supply of wood. I don't use it for primary heat, but during power outages in the past, that's what we would use. But some people would say use a kerosene space heater or a buddy heater. Okay, that makes some sense. But you still have to stock fuel for that, and those things eat up a lot of fuel. Kerosene heaters actually don't, but you still need to store fuel. So at the end of the day, you still need to store fuel. With the generator, it uses the same fuel as your car, so storing gasoline is easy and convenient, and you're able to rotate it. Um, you know, so when people talk about, well, use non-electric alternatives, you know, okay, so battery-powered flashlights and lights, so you don't have to power your standard lights. That makes sense, but now you have to stock a ton of batteries, and now you need the ability to recharge rechargeable batteries. So now you need, you know, an inverter, maybe charge them from your car. So now you go turn on your car, let it idle so you can recharge batteries. People talk about candles. Well, candles aren't really renewable. I mean, they're still burning fuel. There's a safety hazard. Um, they make propane lights, but again, fuel use. Um, the one area where I would recommend a non-electric heat source is um, cooking, right? Because electric stoves consume a lot of electricity, and it's just not that efficient to power a generator with fuel to produce heat for a stove. Like, generally speaking, it would be better to have a gas alternative when it comes to heat. In my case, we have a natural gas stove, so it's non-electric, and you can use a lighter to start it. So we can use it during a power outage without electricity. Now, many people will say, but natural gas, well, what if they shut natural gas off? Well, luckily where I live, at least in my lifetime, I've never witnessed a natural gas shut off. Depending on where you live, if you live in an earthquake-prone environment, granted, you might run out of natural gas, they might turn it off. But that's why you need to plan accordingly and kind of have a system. And you know, so like this, I don't need to power my stove because it's natural gas. And then I have backup cooking options too. You know, refrigeration, many people will say, just use a cooler. Okay, but now you have to go buy ice. Do you know the number one thing to disappear from the shelves when a disaster hits? Ice. I mean, gas is up there too, but especially in a hot environment, ice is one of the first things to go. I don't want to go to the gas station and risk getting attacked because I was able to buy 2 bags of ice and my neighbor wasn't, you know? I've never wanted to rely on ice. I think it's an efficient way of cooling, but It's kind of silly to buy. Now, again, it goes back to your climate. Where I live, it gets very cold. As I'm filming this video outside, it's about 42 degrees. 42 degrees is generally kind of the temperature your fridge is at. So if it's the middle of winter, where I live, it can get down to -20, -30. And guess what? That's colder than most freezers get. So if you have tons of frozen food and there's a lot of snow on the ground and it's very cold, you dig a hole in the snow will act as an insulator, which will seem counterintuitive, but you can dig a square in the snow, put all your frozen goods in there and put like a sheet of plywood on top, and then during the day, if the sun does come out and it starts to warm up, that snow will act as an insulator, and that food will, I wouldn't say impossible, but it will be hard for that food to get above freezing, because that snow is literally right there, which that snow will always be frozen, otherwise it won't be snow. And I've tested this myself, so it's not like some bullshit I'm trying to spew. So again, it comes to skills and also thinking through and thinking like MacGyver, using alternatives and coming up with stuff and working with your environmental parameters. And so it all comes full circle with choosing a generator. But I thought some people might find this video chock full of information. Other people might say, like, you're trying to sell a generator. No. I spent years and years and years, and I went through multiple power outages without a generator, and I survived just fine. At the end of the day, I don't think a generator is needed to stay alive, but a generator sure makes living through a blackout or a power outage or any type of natural disaster a hell of a lot easier, and it's an option I'd rather have than not have. So hopefully you guys like this video. I've rambled on long enough. If you guys want any more information, eventually I might do a full-fledged review, but there's already so many reviews on this generator out there. And I might come back and do a part 2 or a part 3 to this video, depending on if people find the information I provided useful. Like always, go back to my homepage, watch some of my current videos. If you like what you see, feel free to subscribe. We'll catch you in the next video.